Jose, we're going to go down to 7th Ave and we're going to take a right. So, beautiful view this morning of the Empire State Building right in front of us. Tallest building in the world from 1930 to 1974. The Depression was on when it was built. It only took 14 months to build that building. You have the opportunity to go to the top if you like, not on this tour, but during your visit. It's especially beautiful, well, actually both during the daytime as well as evening. And they give you the opportunity to buy a pass that will allow the two admissions, once during the day and once at night, and probably well worth it. To the left is the New Yorker Hotel, same era as the Empire State Building. This is a Art Deco building, as is the Empire State. It was purchased some years back by another company that's gone in. They're refurbishing it. It had gone downhill. It's looking a lot better. Not sure if I can recommend it as a place to stay. I don't know. I've never stayed there, but it's certainly, if you're walking by, it's worth stopping and taking a look inside. Straight ahead, you see the steam coming out of the street, right? We're not built on any sort of a volcanic area. This is a municipal steam system. It heats about 1,800 older buildings in New York. It also provides steam for hospitals to sterilize equipment, etc., etc. From time to time, they need to let the steam out. They need to release the pressure, and then at other times there's a steam leak. They bring in these 8-foot pipes, either orange or orange and white stripe, to get that steam up above car and pedestrian level. It's pretty hot. It's about 450 degrees when it comes out of the pipe. And it will burn you. Perhaps more importantly, if you just let that steam come out at street level, it's hard to see that car or that pedestrian in front of you. So here we are sitting in New York City traffic. Rush hour is probably about over, but yeah, there's a lot of traffic throughout the day. I don't know if you know this or not, but the population of Manhattan, where we are, is 1.6 million. There's 8 million people total in the city, but on this island of 23 square miles, 1.6 million people live. If that's not enough, 3 million more come into work every day. And if that's not enough, or Monday to Friday they come into work, and if that's not enough, last year we had 68 million tourists. So I say park to park. Basically, the people who are coming into work are coming into work from Central Park down to Battery Park. That's where the major business districts are. And the same thing's true with tourism. The 68 million people who are coming here are spending most of their time between Central Park and Battery Park. So there's a whole lot of people in half this island that already's got 1.6 million people. To the right is one of the entrances to Penn Station, one of our two major train stations here in the city. It's an Amtrak station, and it's also a commuter station where people coming into work. And so you'll see people just coming out of the doorway here to the right by the throngs, if you will. So we're going to sit at this traffic a little bit more. To the left is Macy's, the world's largest store. It's 9 stories high. It's a full block long, as you can see. It's a full block wide. They are the sponsors of our Thanksgiving Day Parade, which the viewing stand would be at the next avenue up to the left. It's Herald Square. They also sponsor our 4th of July fireworks show, so they're a good neighbor. A lot of us feel fondly about Macy's.
1 minute.
1 minute, and here's New York's bravest. We love our firemen. We have a police officer on the tour today. We love our police officers too. We love our firemen. They're a great group of people. We're going to make a right here on 7th Avenue. We're going to be passing Madison Square Garden on the right. If you notice down 33rd Street, which will be the next side street to the right, you'll be able to see the round garden in the back. We're going to go around it actually. It's like two full blocks wide. It's between 33rd Street and 31st Street, and between 7th Avenue here and 8th Avenue. So our driver's got a tough job. These pedestrians should be stopping about now, but of course they're not. Everybody's in a hurry. can't get to work. If you notice on the Madison Square Garden sign coming up, Billy Joel. So Billy Joel is a New Yorker in the broad sense. He's not from the city.
Time.
Hotel Pennsylvania opened in 1919. It was at the time the largest hotel in the world. Some say it's haunted. It was the first hotel to have a refrigerator and a laundry system. Imagine that. Immediately look to your left and up high down this street on 32nd Street. You're going to see a little bridge. Can you see it? The Traverse. It is a 3-story. I know it's real quick, but it is something very cool because you don't see many of them in New York City very high. It connected Gimbel's store, the big department store Gimbel's that was always in a rivalry with Saks and Macy's. I want to look. There's an eagle floating around here. As Ronald said, this entire block is where Penn Station, Pennsylvania Station, once stood. A beautiful Beaux-Arts building designed by the esteemed McKee, Mead & White. It was a tragedy. All of New York mourned in 1963 when the building was demolished. And up here on your right, you're going to see Madison Square Garden, which today, you know, I guess people are used to looking at, but back then people were horrified. Did anyone ever see Mad Men, the TV show Mad Men? Yeah. There was actually an episode where the advertising agency was hired to create a whole PR campaign because people hated Madison Square Garden so much. But many live events, concerts, the New York Knicks, the Rangers. But there are a few remnants left of Penn Station. Coming up on our left is the old coal power plant. And it's actually what powered Penn Station. So that's pretty interesting because it looks like this ghost from the past. The windows are all barred and blocked. But that is a piece of Penn Station. Now, I mentioned McKee, Mead & White. They were well known for their beautiful Beaux-Arts neoclassical buildings. Coming up at the end of this block, another block-long building, is the Farley Building, which is our main post office. And the good news is what we lost in 1963 is being revitalized. An echo of the past is being transformed inside the old post office. Somehow people don't write as many letters as they once did, so there's a lot of room in this post office. So if you ever get a chance in the coming years to visit the new train station, that post office, with the beautiful style that it echoes the Penn Station, and it has beautiful vaulted ceilings to echo those old cast iron vaulted platforms of the train stations past. This post office is very important a couple times a year.
Right turn on 8th Avenue, please.
Yes, we're going to take a right here on 8th, and this entire block, you have to imagine, was once Penn Station. But directly across the street looks very similar, which is why it was so easy to make this decision to extend Penn Station, because for decades, people really don't like Penn Station. And if you've ever traveled by Penn, you're standing amongst hundreds of people waiting for them to announce which track you're leaving from, and then when it's posted, everyone goes running. It's a madhouse. One of those New York things. Straight ahead, look, there's a lot of glass towers. That is Hudson Yards. It's the largest development project in the world. And right up high is the ledge. You can see like a triangular topped building. There's a ledge with a glass bottom. It's going to be the highest outdoor observatory in the world when it opens. And it connects to the High Line. We're going to see that later. So now you're seeing the beautiful Penn Station with these, a block long of these Corinthian columns. I can't wait to go inside because, looking at those old pictures of Penn with the cast iron platforms, vaulted ceilinged platforms are going to be resurrected. It's going to be called the Moynihan Train Station. So straight ahead, we're on 8th Avenue now, and we're going to be going straight ahead towards Columbus Circle. See if there's anything else I should remark about here. The New Yorker, one thing that I wanted to mention is that the terrace room, many famous celebrities have come through there. Right here on the left, you get a chance to see some of those ornaments that Ronald was talking about. We're approaching the
uptown, folks, and here along 8th Avenue, I'd like to remind you all that our avenues do run north and south. Our streets run east and west, and on these avenues, of course, we do describe them as going uptown and downtown. You know, we New Yorkers like to say things real quick, so if you're, you know, hey, I'm going up north, no, you're going uptown towards Central Park, and you'd be going downtown towards, of course, the tip of our island where the World Trade Center actually sits. Now, we are in the heart of the Fashion District here in New York City, one of my favorite neighborhoods. As a high school student, I went to the High School of Art and Design. I was a photography student, and most of my friends were designers and artists. And so in these buildings to our left and right stand some of the showrooms of some of the most famous American designers and foreign designers that we have here in New York City. The Garment District is tagged with these beautiful green flags that indicate this area of New York City. Back in the early 1900s, you know, this area would have been full of men pushing carts around with clothing on them. Once in a while you'll still see that, but not so often anymore in these days. But you can look up to your left and see these big windows. That's Ripley Glitter Studio right there to our left. They opened up another studio. That's where a lot of our young people will go and take their acting classes and do some voiceover work and things of that nature. I know many of our students that come here to visit New York City will go and do combat classes and other training that is theatrically kind of connected. So here in the Fashion District, you can actually go onto these side streets and find yourself in some of those little shops and places like Mood Fabrics, which is of course featured in Project Runway, the television competition for designers that are attending school here in New York City. And these showrooms or these stores are actually only open mostly to merchants. So you'd be able to buy all of your stock for your small shop on Long Island or in Queens or, you know, outside of the city in Texas. So we get a lot of people who come here and do that kind of shopping. Fabrics, buttons, snaps, sequins, all of the accessories that you could possibly need are found here in the Fashion District on these little side streets between 37th and I would say about 40th Street. Now, as we kind of sit here, but we're rolling along slowly going uptown, we'll be approaching Port Authority. And to our right, Port Authority is going to be on our left. To our right, we're going to see the New York Times building. Now, this is, of course, not the original New York Times building, but indeed one that was designed by an architect out of Italy. You know, for some time they actually called it the ugliest building in New York. But it did become actually well known for its energy saving and you know, being environmentally friendly. So it is one of the top LEEDs, what we describe in measurements of LEEDs, constructions that we have here in New York City, and maybe one of the top 10 in the world. Now, Port Authority is not the exact nicest place that one might want to travel. As you're coming into the city, you might be a little bit, you know, scared away by its kind of starkness. It's an old terminal, but this is where our buses will take us out of the island or off of the island of Manhattan and across the river through the tunnel through New Jersey, and then bring us to the rest of the United States. So anyone that is trying to get out of here by bus, a lot of people will commute on a daily basis. And thank you. And of course, for those that are traveling, even going across country, you might get a bus right here out of the Port Authority station. Great place just in case while you guys are here in Times Square, use a restroom, okay? So one of those things that is most important is recognizing where you can take a little stop without having to buy something or wait on a long line inside of a tiny Starbucks, okay? We'll be approaching and rolling into Times Square in just a moment, so I want you all to keep your cameras ready. To our right, we're going to be looking right down that beautiful corridor of 42nd Street, and we'll see some of the movie theaters, some of the awnings. You'll see Madame Tussauds. and other attractions that we have here in the Times Square area. You know, Times Square is not just this little square, or it's actually a triangle, but it runs from 42nd Street all the way up past 50th Street, if you will. And we're going to let the police cars pass by here. And
are you good in that spot, or you want to come move here?
So as my colleague pointed out, to our left is the Port Authority bus terminal. While not the prettiest building in New York, hundreds of thousands of commuters do pass through that building every day, coming from New Jersey, upstate, Hudson River Valley, and elsewhere. But if you are on the right side of the bus, please take a look at the beautiful New York Times building. So the New York Times first moved up at the beginning of the 20th century up to the Times Square area. Previously, the area had been known as Longacre Square. It was such a big deal when the Times moved from lower Manhattan up here that Longacre was renamed into Times Square, and the name has stuck today. Well, this is obviously not their original building. This beautiful building, which was designed by Renzo Piano here on 8th Avenue, is really a remarkable structure and is the current home of the paper of record. But we will be coming up in about a block and a half on 42nd Street, which is really the central corridor of Times Square. So as Kristen was saying, really take a look at the beautiful neon lights of all the theaters and buildings that you will see along there. So one thing I'll point out, I'd love to mention about the New York Times building when you see it here from the front. It has this kind of grill design on it. Where you can see the logo of the New York Times. This actually had to be redesigned and redone several years ago because when I first saw this building, you're probably thinking, if I did not have a fear of heights, that would actually be kind of fun to climb. And several people did actually try that. The sort of grill siding of the Times building actually used to be a little bit more accessible than it currently is. And there was one high-profile incident several years ago where a daredevil did begin to ascend up the building. And when you are climbing up a building that is literally filled with high-profile reporters, you're going to get a lot of attention very quickly. Obviously, kind of also an excuse not to do your work. So after that particular incident, they realized they were going to have to redo the front a little bit and make it a little bit less easy and fun to climb. So that's sort of the fun things you don't think about when people like Renzo Piano in his studio are designing a building like this. One thing that I would actually mention about the Port Authority that is kind of fun to do is there actually is really nice bowling alley in there. They have actually been beginning a lot of work to try and make it a little bit of a less depressing building, like a lot of the ongoing work inside Penn Station right now. So here we have 42nd Street. Everyone, take a look. You can take a look on the left and right, but certainly the right-hand side is where you're going to see most of the more famous structures. You've got two beautiful movie theaters here, as well as theaters like the Amsterdam. You've got the Lyric Theater also over there, which technically you would enter on 43rd Street, currently showing Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And key thing to understand as we start to make our way through the theater district is while today this is a major source of revenue, this area really saw a significant decline, particularly in the 70s and 80s. If you've ever seen movies featuring the Times Square and theater district area, such as Midnight Cowboy, you really know this was a very considered seedy area, a lot of crime, a lot of prostitution, and a lot of theaters that didn't exactly show what we would think of as motion pictures today. XXX theaters, dirty theaters, viewing booths, peep booths as they would call them, and really became to be kind of an eyesore for New York City. So it was starting in the 1990s when our mayor was Rudy Giuliani, who's definitely not been in the news at all lately. And at that time, he passed a number of regulations. He really wanted it to be a linchpin, certainly of his first term, to revitalize this area. So they got rid of all the sort of porno theaters, so there's still a few around, re-regulate that, and really restore a lot of these beautiful old theaters, such as the Amsterdam, that were literally falling apart in many cases, and began to bring beautiful productions back to the theater district, and starting with The Lion King and then going into Wicked, and really made this a destination again. Not a place that tourists would want to go just as a novelty or curiosity, but a real, true destination here in the city. And really check out a show while you're here. Now, as we're making our way further up 8th Avenue, On the left-hand side, you can see a glass building with a sort of crisscrossing triangular design on it. That is the Hearst Tower. But the building itself, the basic structure of the building actually dates back to the 1920s. The glass structure of the building you're looking at is just a little bit over a decade old and represents one of the longest sort of...
So we are here on 8th Avenue. Our avenues in Manhattan run north to south. The streets run east to west. And if you're walking around and you see that the street numbers are getting higher, that means you're heading north or uptown. If they're getting lower, it's south or downtown. And this particular section is known as Midtown Manhattan. That goes from 23rd Street up to 59th. And Jose, we're going to be going all the way up to 59th. Coming up to our right is a firehouse that lost over a dozen firefighters in the 9/11 tragedy. The fire departments usually cover certain areas, and of course on that day, people were responding from all areas. We have, Manhattan is just one of 5 boroughs here that make up New York City. Now the next several blocks down to our, actually look to your left. I'd like you to look to your left at this building. This is called Worldwide Plaza. This was the site of the 3rd Madison Square Garden. This is actually where Marilyn Monroe aspirated happy birthday to President Kennedy. Yes. Our first 2 gardens were in the same spot. We're going to see that later on our tour. And they knocked those down to make bigger. Then we had that one. That has currently houses Ogilvy and Mather, a large advertising firm. Here we have Starbucks to the left. Do I have any Starbucks fans on the bus? I call them my peeps. We have, get this, 240 Starbucks just here on the island of Manhattan. Remember I said there's 5 boroughs? If you take all the other boroughs, we kind of refer to those as the outer boroughs, we've got 110 more. Now over to our right is TD, Toronto Dominion Bank. I want you to look 2 buildings in right after that Spectrum, Chuck, that's on the right, and you're going to see a sign that says the Soup Kitchen. This is the home of the Soup Nazi, made famous by Seinfeld. This is not a restaurant where you would go and sit down. It's a place where it's takeout. So usually the lines in the winter get pretty long. So when you go by there, there's a big sign out. He's got at least 10 soups a day as specials. And he expects you to get your decision made while you're in line. We have something here called a New York Minute. A New York Minute is about 30 seconds. We're known to work pretty fast. So he expects, the owner, that you will go and make your decision before he gets to you. And when he gets to you, if you start to procrastinate and say, let me see, what will I have? What does he say? No soup for you. Yes. Hence his name, the Soup Nazi. Coming up to our left is a building that's bottom 6 floors are very different from the top. This is the headquarters for Hearst Publications. Now in 1928, William Randolph Hearst had this building, started to have this building built, and he was going to have it be apartments. He wanted to house his mistress, Marion Davies, here. By 1929, they got up to the 6th floor, and what happened in this country in 1929?
Great Depression.
We had the crash, and even William Randolph Hearst got hurt with that, so they stopped building. In 2006, they wanted to continue, but obviously the architectural company that they had used before was no longer in business. So they've done this in a very contemporary design. Some people find it to be an eyesore. It's kind of yin and yang there. But Good Housekeeping has its kitchens here. If you have ever read a menu, or a recipe rather, that says that it was made in the tested in the Good Housekeeping kitchens, this is the site of where it was. Now coming up in front of us is a statue of Christopher Columbus. It's right in the center of the bus. It was erected in 1892 by Italian Americans to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America. And this is pretty much where we measure everywhere in the country from when they say you're X amount of miles from New York City. Think about it. You say you're so long from New York City, there's 5 boroughs. What would you be using? Manhattan. Well, Manhattan is 13.5 miles long. That's the point from which they'll measure. And when we get up here, Jose, we're going to be making a right onto 59th Street. And we're going to be seeing Central Park. Now let me tell you a little bit about this building to our left first. This is the Time Warner building. This used to be the home of the New York Coliseum. I call this building the Twin Towers, so if you're on the driver's side, you're getting a very good view of that. Each of these is 80 stories high. And The bottom is high-end stores, and the top is condominiums. The average price of a condominium in here is $15 million. Now, you may be saying, who could afford that? Well, two things. One, not a tour guide. And number two, Katie Couric used to live here. The owner of the New York Jets, Woody Johnson, used to live here before he became a diplomat. He's now doing a lot with England. And at Christmas time, let's leave out Christmas time because you've come after.
Okay, we are here turning onto Central Park South, known also as Billionaire Lane, especially in the last few years. If you look to your right, there are very tall buildings being built. To your right, you're going to see the famous carriages of Central Park. This is where you come, and if you want to go in the romantic ride of the park, Central Park, this is where you come. You also have the statues for those history buff, especially South America. On the right, you have the statues of San Martin and Simón Bolívar, liberators in South America. We also have here the Exits House to your left, right. Today is a Marriott. The Exits House was once an experiment on condominiums and also was what inspired for better rooms in the hotel industry. We're coming up here on 6th Avenue, Avenue of the Americas. If you look right, you're going to see an impressive array of buildings. It's one of the few places in Manhattan in which all the buildings align like Legos. Also, you will be able to see the Radio City Music Hall. On your left, here is one of the famous ponds in Central Park. Right ahead where the Simón Bolívar statue is, if you walk down that path, it's a very nice, it's remnants of Sunday in the Park. Also, some of these buildings, if you are fans of Cary Grant and Doris Day and movies in the 60s, a lot of those movies were filmed in apartments in this building looking on Central Park. We are coming on your right. We'll be able to see the Plaza Hotel pretty soon, very famous landmark in New York. And we are going also to make a right, Jose on 5th Avenue. We are going to see also right here, this is a nice area. Across from the plaza is what is just called the General Motors building. It is the only building in Manhattan that is made out of marble. It also occupies the whole block. There's a beautiful fountain to your right here. This is the entrance. The Paris Theater is also here, famous for most of the movie premieres in New York are performed here in the Paris. We're going to turn right here on 5th Avenue, and it's the Apple Store. Is the flagship of the Apple Store in New York. Actually, the glass cube was designed and built by Apple. It was closed for a little while because of defects on the glass and reopened soon after. Also, in this street, you keep going and straight ahead on the block, it used to be the Playboy Club. For those that remember the bunnies and
Is that a sports team?
sports. Oh yeah. The New York Bunnies. In this area, this area when you come, you're a tourist. I recommend that you come with a mind of reminiscing all these movies that you've seen throughout the time. You know, you are a fan of Sex in the City, dressing up and going down 5th Avenue. Besides seeing the landmarks, you can feel rich walking down the streets here. Most of the very high-end stores in the world are here on Fifth Avenue. Right here coming up comes one of the most famous department stores, Bertha and Gutman. There are two of them, one across each other. And here, you know, in the old time, you should see the limousines and all these famous people coming out and buying you know, high-end merchandise. As you can see, you have Louis Vuitton.
Tom,
You
time.
Get ready. Here we are on Fifth Avenue. Now, you've all heard of Fifth Avenue, right? What does Fifth Avenue relate to? Money, right? Money, right? And everybody's heard of Fifth Avenue. Now, if I told you we were going down 4th Avenue, it wouldn't mean a whole lot to you. If I say we were going down to 7th Avenue, well, if you're a fashion fan, you might know about 7th Avenue, but there's something special about 5th Avenue. Now, in many cities, I imagine the city you're from, if you live on the riverfront, that's where the wealthy people live. That's a good place to live, on the riverfronts. But in New York, the wealthy want to live as far away from either riverfront as you could get. Why is that? Why would they want to live away from the riverfronts? Well, because New York has been a business town, and it's been a business town from as far back as the Dutch in the 1600s. The rivers were reserved for business purposes only. And back then, it meant that they were dirty, they were smelly, they were river pirates, they were dangerous. So the wealthy wanted to live as far from either riverfront as they could get. And that's why Fifth Avenue, that's why they lived on Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue is in the middle of Manhattan, the middle of the island, okay? So this is why the wealthy lived on Fifth Avenue. At one point, there were mansions up and down Fifth Avenue. The wealthy just kept moving north, first from Greenwich Village, then into this neighborhood here. Eventually, they ended up on the Upper East Side, which is the wealthy neighborhood in New York right now, on Fifth Avenue, Park Avenue. I'm sure you've all heard of that. And what happened instead on Fifth Avenue was these very, very expensive stores. Now, there is one of those mansions left that was left here. It's going to be coming up on the left. One of the mansions at Fifth Avenue. You'll see some flags on it in just a moment. It has some red awnings, and that's currently the Cartier building. But this was a wealthy family who lived here. It was the Hagelin family. It was Charles Hagelin was a wealthy merchant. So here it is on the left. Take a look at that. Imagine living in that with just you yourself and your servants. Right there. That's the last of the mansions left on Fifth Avenue. Anybody here with any Irish blood? Irish blood in you? Irish blood there? Well, coming up on our left is St. Patrick's Cathedral, a symbol of rising Irish power in the late 1800s. Now, when this was built here, this was a residential neighborhood. So when Archbishop John Hughes wanted to build a cathedral, he went to the Pope in Rome, and he said, I want to build a great cathedral. And the Pope said, well, I can either make you a cardinal, or I can build you a great cathedral. And Archbishop Hughes says, I want a great cathedral here. Because he wanted those spires to tower above the homes of his Protestant rivals. So what did the Protestants do? Well, they said, we're going to build something bigger, and we're going to put it up on a hill. So they built Cathedral St. John up in the neighborhood of the Morningside Heights. This is a basilica. Yes, many of you probably know a basilica is defined as a cathedral that a pope has visited. And three popes have visited this cathedral here. If you're walking in this neighborhood and you get a chance, make sure you go into St. Patrick's. It's a really beautiful example of neo-Gothic architecture. Now on our left is Rockefeller Center. This was the first mall. Yeah, the first mall. You know, a combination of different stores, indoor spaces, outdoor spaces, built by the Rockefeller family. Rockefeller family is one of the really families of great wealth and power in New York City. And they wanted to build this thing in the 1930s. All these buildings are part of Rockefeller Center. On our left is Saks Fifth Avenue. That's the flag. That's how they got the name Saks Fifth Avenue. You're making it right here. How they got the name Saks Fifth Avenue. So we're going to be going sort of through Rockefeller Center. We'll be passing by. Any of you see the Today Show? Anybody get up this morning? Yeah, who got up this morning at 6 o'clock to go to the Today Show? Did you bring a sign? Did you get on TV? That's awesome. I love when that happens. So what's going to be coming up on our left here, where they broadcast the Today Show, that's the famous outdoor plaza you'll see. And on our right is Rockefeller Plaza. You'll see the statue of Prometheus, the famous Greek god of fire. In the wintertime, there's a skating rink down there. In the summertime, there's a cafe. Right over there with that giant, looks like a goose, huh? Yeah, goose head is where they put up the great Christmas tree.
1 minute.
Looks like we're doing some filming over here. Here's one of our production vans here. You'll see these all over the city.
You'll know they're doing about 15 to 20 productions every day in New York City. The famous auction house over here on our left. We can go there. Careful, don't raise your hand, or you're going to end up buying something that you didn't plan. Okay. So we're going to be now crossing 6th Avenue. This is the heart of corporate New York. I call these the gray flannel suits of buildings, built in the 1950s, when everybody wanted to have a building that looked the same. Well, that's what I got, a building that looked the same. And it's, as I said, it's the heart of our corporate New York. On our right here is a really interesting building. It looks like a leftover from the 1920s. Well, it was leftover from the 1920s. The Hurley brothers.
Time.
Okay, well,
a compromise. That building is all about real estate in New York. It defines it. The Rockefellers didn't get their way. That old building from the 1920s stands there. It's a fake Magnolia Bakery. If you want to go to the real overpriced one, go down to the Village. Classic joke. To the left of you is Fox News. To the right is something you normally wouldn't see, NBC. So to the left is Fox News, and to the right is NBC headquarters in Rockefeller Center. But beautiful day here. This is always one of the colder parts of New York City because of the wind tunnels. And you can see all these food trucks to the left and right of us. This is a huge office worker area. And who does not want to get out of their office at 11:30 or 12 o'clock during the daytime and come down to the cold and have a nice cigarette? It's not easy being a food vendor in New York, and not too far away, if you really like Middle Eastern food, there's famous Egyptian carts. But to be honest with you, it's not the cheapest thing in New York City. Food is very expensive here. On average, if you want to get a decent meal, just decent, it'll cost you $15 to $20. My recommendations are to go to Whole Foods Market over at Columbus Circle, not too far away here. Go into the park. If it's cold out and you don't want your meal, you can take it into Starbucks and be a typical New Yorker and take up space. But right here is the heart of Midtown. We're kind of in between the east and west. 6th Avenue is where where 5th Avenue marks the difference between east and west. But in a nutshell here, when we make a left onto 7th Avenue, you're going to see the difference of East Midtown and West Midtown. Roughly, West Midtown is Broadway, East Midtown is more office and a little more classy. But it's all about center location. There's the center business district of New York City, and in fact, on the west side of Midtown, there's more technology companies coming here. Facebook, Amazon, Google, all want to be in Midtown West. A lot of their employees no longer want to be on the West Coast. The proponents of being on the west side of Manhattan, particularly Hudson Yards, is that they have new buildings, a diverse and vibrant city to work and live in. The average income for these tech workers is $135,000, and it's one of the few industries that's actually growing in New York. They're also smart. There's a huge South Asian community in New Jersey, and that's easy access to the west side. I was a Port Authority police officer in the PAT train, and I was amazed at the number of Indians that came from New Jersey to commute to the west side, primarily in the tech companies. The tech companies like being here also because they're close to the European market. And this is not a one-company town like it is now in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. So as I said, we look ahead here, you're going to see that it's becoming more fun, colorful, and vibrant compared to the east side. Rockefeller Center is beautiful, but in some ways it's too classy and too clean. A lot of these buildings are landmarked. For example, see that Playwright Tavern? Up to the front, it's going to be to the center. We'll make a left here.
1 minute.
But I want to speak to our left, one of our famous monuments, Hunter Green Scaffolding. It's very famous in New York. You can see it everywhere you go. There's hundreds of miles of it. And basically, in a nutshell, a lot of the landlords find it cheaper to put this scaffolding up here than to pay for costly repairs. It covers their liability and roughly only costs them $750 a month if it's a small building with 200 feet of scaffolding. I'll speak more about it later because it's definitely going to be on our route. We'll be making a left here, Jose? Cuidado. I was speaking about the playwright. It's up to the front here. Back in the early 1990s, this famous Irishman brought up all these playwrights and was able to get about four.
You are ready to go.
Okay, in New York, everything is under construction, and in front of us, one of the most famous buildings in the city,
Volume.
the Flatiron Building in front of us, 1902, 22-story, is one of the most famous building, and we are at Madison Square Park, where the first and the second Madison Square Garden was built. We are at a very famous intersection, the Broadway and Fifth Avenue. The Broadway is the first street in New York. We are going downtown. There is a grid in New York from 14th Street. It's very easy to move in Manhattan, that is synonymous with the city. This is Fifth Avenue on the left, Broadway. 23rd Street is famous for Chelsea Hotel, where many artists, musicians, writers used to live on the right. Is not far. Italy, a very famous store where you can buy a lot of delicious and very expensive Italian food. We are going to the Greenwich Village through Fifth Avenue, and you can see the Flatiron Building on the left. This area changed a lot, but ok. Abbiamo appena passato il Flatiron Building, sulla destra Chelsea. Chelsea Hotel è uno degli alberghi più famosi, mitici per quanto riguarda la vita degli artisti a New York. Ci stiamo dirigendo verso l'inizio della quinta, Washington Square Park, dove inizia tutto, il Greenwich Village, il posto degli artisti, dei poeti, dei bohemian, dei pittori, dove Bob Dylan scriveva le sue canzoni, dove Jackson Pollock vendeva i suoi quadri, dove Stanley Kubrick giocava a scacchi. Siamo ancora sulla quinta, ed è una strada che diciamo, ecco, in lontananza già si vede l'arco dedicato a George Washington, con le due statue che lo rappresentano, no? In tempo di guerra e di pace. Washington Square Park è molto vicino, e appunto vi dicevo che in passato è stato un posto importante per gli artisti, è cambiato tanto, è una zona molto ricca, costano gli appartamenti quasi $23.000 al metro quadrato, e oggi ci vivono un sacco di artisti famosi. È una location naturale per il cinema, assieme a Central Park e Times Square, le tre location più importanti della città, tanti film girati a Washington Square Park in questa zona, da Eri ti presento Sally, a proposito di Davis, un film che racconta gli anni 50 e quanto era facile vivere nel village anche per gli artisti squattrinati con pochi soldi, soprattutto su McDougal Street, ogni pochi metri c'era un caffè, un posto dove esibirti, potevi veramente vivere con poco. Bob Dylan arrivò nel 61 in questa zona qua e cambiò un po' tutto, perché si accesero i riflettori, iniziò a diventare una zona molto alla moda, turistica. Pian pianino tutti gli artisti si sono spostati sulla parte est. Oggi c'è New York University nell'area, stiamo quasi arrivando sulla 14ª, dove inizia il Greenwich Village. Dicevo di New York University, una delle più antiche università private.
All right, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, great. So my friends, we're about to take a right turn onto 14th Street, which is the longest east-west street on the island of Manhattan. This island that we're on is actually the smallest physical county in the entire United States, only 22 square miles in size, 13 and a half miles long from downtown to uptown. We never say north or south on the island of Manhattan. Downtown is south, uptown is north, and 2.5 miles from east to west here at 14th Street. We say east and west, there's no distinction there, so keep that in mind. Now, it's the dividing line between two of my favorite neighborhoods in all of New York. On our right is a neighborhood called Chelsea. Do we have any soccer fans on the bus? Okay,
Boo,
1.5.
Chelsea, boo.
Yeah, it's named for the same neighborhood in London where Chelsea Football Club, the famous soccer team, comes from. And on the left is Greenwich Village, which we're going to cruise through a little bit later. My favorite neighborhood in New York, due in no small part to the fact that it is where I actually grew up. Now, one of my favorite things in New York takes place every year on streets like 14th Street. You have to come back in the summertime, either a couple of weeks before or a couple of weeks after the summer solstice. Now, as I mentioned, we're on an east-west street right here. We're actually heading west. So, Manhattan is on a grid, as we discussed before, but it's not on a perfect east-west grid. It's about 10 degrees off from perfect true west. But twice a year, the sun sets to the west in just such a perfect way that it completely lines up with the street grid of Manhattan. And it illuminates the streets in this fabulous orange and red glow. And this has been happening ever since the buildings were built in Manhattan. But growing up here in New York, I never heard of this thing, right? But thanks to an astronomer named Neil deGrasse Tyson, some of you might have heard of him. He is the head astrophysicist at the American Museum of Natural History, and actually a proud graduate of the Bronx High School of Science, my high school, the Bronx Science. He started kind of marketing this as an event in New York. He said, what a great astronomical phenomenon. But he needed a name to come up with it, to kind of get people excited about it. So he coined the term Manhattanhenge, because when the sun goes down, it's like the sun shining through the stones at Stonehenge. And what happens is every year, twice a year, when the weather cooperates, when this event is happening, people come out here into the middle of the street, despite the traffic, despite everything, and have wine and cheese and take pictures, and it becomes one of these de facto New York parties. So I highly recommend, if you ever make it back to New York City in the summertime, check if you're here during Manhattanhenge. It's truly one of the great events here in New York, and one that many people don't really know about. Now, as we continue west here, guys, we're skirting those two neighborhoods, like I said, but we're approaching a third neighborhood straight ahead called the Meatpacking District, which is one of the neighborhoods that is the most in transition in all of New York City. It is called that because it used to be home to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of commercial butchers. This is where we used to get our meat back in the days before mass refrigeration. You could freeze meat and send it all around the country. There's still about 30 or 40 commercial butchers here in the Meatpacking District, but they have been replaced by high fashionistas. And to me, it's one of the most interesting neighborhoods. You have designer stores like Giorgio Armani and Alexander McQueen and Diane von Furstenberg. And we're going to take a left on Hudson Street, please. But it's one of these only in New York tableaus, one of these only in New York scenes. You'll see the fashionistas walking around in their $2,000 Jimmy Choo stiletto heels, right past a guy in a bloody smock having just chopped up a cow. You can't see that anywhere else, as far as I know, in the world. Today, the Meatpacking District, as I said, has lots of high-end fashion. There used to be, the left turn here, yes. Thank you. There used to be a lot of music clubs here when I was growing up in the 80s. As this neighborhood started to transition, this is where we come to hear a lot of live music and go dancing. But in New York, the only constant is change. So things keep changing constantly here, due in large part to something we see directly in front of us. You might notice what looks like a train trestle going across 10th Avenue, one block ahead. That's actually one of New York's newest parks and influential parks. It's called the Heinlein Park, and it's built on an old elevated freight railway about 20 feet up in the air. If you walk the mile and a half, you get these absolutely amazing tableaus, amazing views of the city, a different perspective on the city just by walking around and seeing it from a different perspective 25 feet up. So we have now made the turn into Greenwich Village. We're in the neighborhood on the far west side. Locals refer to this as the West Village.
And that's your time.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay.
How's the volume for everyone?
Loud.
How's that better?
Loud.
A little bit better, okay. So welcome everybody to Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village is a wonderful neighborhood and one of the largest historic districts in New York City. One of my favorite things that I truly love about this neighborhood is, besides the beautiful 19th century architecture, is how dynamic it is. When we think about a lot of other historic districts in Manhattan, we think of, say, Soho, we think of cast iron buildings, and we think of shopping, but this neighborhood really can't be pinned down to any 1, 2, 3, or even 4 things. We're gonna veer left on the Bleecker. After, not here, but coming up, I'll let you know. So when we think about Greenwich Village, one of the things you see here, and you really get a scale of it, on Hudson Street is history, the beautiful old 19th century architecture. Hudson Street, several blocks up, is actually where Jane Jacobs lived when she was here in the village, this really great activist who helped preserve a lot of this history here. But we also think about the Bohemians, we think about musicians, we think about the beatniks, and I actually like to think about really good food and really great restaurants. So there's just so much going on here because the neighborhood is so large. Now obviously this street, Hudson Street, is so named because it is named after the nearby Hudson River, which is just a few blocks west of here. What's really unique, as we'll sort of experience as we start to make our way down Bleecker Street shortly about Greenwich Village, is this neighborhood does predate the 1811 Master Grid Plan of New York. So unlike most of the city as we've been experiencing it on this bus so far, so we're just gonna veer left here onto Bleecker. You really get a sense of crisscrossing and what the city was like before that 1811 master plan. For instance, there's spots here, I believe, where West 4th Street intersects with West 11th Street, and numerically that makes absolutely no sense, but it's just part of the beauty of the design of Greenwich Village. So now we are just entering here, we're about to enter as we get the light, Bleecker Street. Bleecker Street is really one of the main commercial stretches of Greenwich Village. And while most of these beautiful side streets like Bethune Street to your right are beautiful residential areas, this is really if you're looking to do shopping in Greenwich Village where you'll come. As you make your way further down, there's a lot of fantastic places. John's Bleecker Street, which is a great pizzeria. There's also Joe's Pizza and Murray's Cheese Bar. Basically what I'm saying is if you have a lactose intolerance, there might be a little bit limited. How many people here are lactose intolerant? I'll raise my hand, that's me. So I don't get to enjoy many of these great foods that much, but it's a really fantastic place. But like I said, one of the great things about Greenwich Village is just how absolutely dynamic it is. Whatever you are looking for out of New York, whether it is shopping, for clothes, or for food, you're looking to experience history, you can find it here. But this section, as we're going to make our way down Bleecker Street, also has something that people know about Greenwich Village, is how often they've seen it in television shows and movies, and how it's been portrayed as this very glamorous, upscale neighborhood, and that's certainly true. As you were to make your way up, you'll see several spots, for instance, that you would recognize from Sex and the City. Do we have any Sex and the City fans on this bus? All right, good. So over here, just to your left, we're actually just passing by Magnolia Bakery. That's been featured in a lot of television shows and movies. We're also coming up here on Perry Street. Right down the block, you'll find the beautiful apartment building that was featured in the show as Carrie's Brownstone. And if you ever go down that street, you'll see that the owner is well aware of how much of a sort of tourist photo op it's become. And there's a little box on the porch where, if you, it's obviously voluntary, but if you take a picture in front of the building, they usually request that you leave a little bit of a donation in the box. That money is
1 minute.
Given to charities, that goes to animal rights organizations. So just also be aware as you're making your way through neighborhoods and taking photos that this is also a city where people live, and just be a little bit respectful. And sometimes these homeowners give you a chance to actually give back to the community while you're sort of taking a part in it. If you were to come up on Bedford Street and walk about a block, to Grove Street and walk about a block to your right down to Bedford, you'll find the famous Friends apartment building, which is probably one of the most photographed buildings in Greenwich Village, despite the fact that the apartment building itself is of no significant historic value. And I always have to remind people, get your beautiful photo of that building, but remember that Friends was not actually filmed here. Largely it was filmed on a soundstage. And if you do find yourself in front of the Friends building, actually turn around and look at the building to its side. where you'll actually see a beautiful historic, one of the last sort of wood frame remaining buildings that you'll find left here in Greenwich Village.
So Greenwich Village is one of the most famous neighborhoods in the entire world, but in New Yorkers we just call it the Village. Now the history of Greenwich Village stretches all the way back to its Indian days when there was an Indian village here called Tapanakan. When the Dutch came, they called it Nortwick. They seized the land from the Indians, and they called it Nortwick. Now, you know, New York is the only major city in the country founded by the Dutch. Many founded by the English, of course, some by the French, New Orleans, Des Moines, many by the Spanish in the Southwest, Santa Fe, San Francisco, Los Angeles, but only one major city founded by the Dutch. We were known as New Amsterdam from 1624 to 1664. So this was a little Dutch town. Eventually, the British seized it. They gave it to a British admiral named Robert Randall, and he came from Greenwich, England. Now, Greenwich, England is where the Royal Observatory is, Greenwich Mean Time. And he named it after his hometown. And that's how it got the name Greenwich Village. During the early 1800s, New York was beset by many serious epidemics, typhoid, cholera, typhoid. And so New Yorkers would flee from the congested, packed-in streets of Lower Manhattan up here into the countryside. Farmers would often find people sleeping in their front yards. And eventually, some of the wealthy New Yorkers started to buy land here and build estates. So Greenwich Village became a wealthy suburb of the city, north of the city. When those wealthy people continued moving northward, eventually ending up in the Madison Square neighborhood and then up to the Upper East Side, it became a reasonably inexpensive place to live. And that's why the artists, the writers known as Bohemians started to come here. And that's where Greenwich Village got its international reputation, as a place where you could march the beat of a different drummer, a place where you could do your own thing. So these Bohemians, including such figures as Edna St. Vincent Millay, the poet, Eugene O'Neill, the playwright, they wanted to turn this into what they wanted to be like an arts neighborhood, the left bank, so to speak, of New York City. It's no longer a place for poor artists, not anymore. It's one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. It is an historic district. How do you know? Look at the street signs. The brown street signs means an historic district. We now have 65 historic districts in the city, and this is the Greenwich Village Historic District. So we're going to be crossing over one of our major avenues into another part of the village, a part of the village best characterized by those folks in the 1950s who will call themselves beatniks. Beatniks. Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, famous beatnik figures. And they hung out in the coffee shops. The coffee shops, go down Bleecker? Good, thank you, yep. They would talk about love and war and death and philosophy and the meaning of life here. So the beatniks in the 1950s were then replaced by the folkies, the folk music artists like Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary, Judy Collins, Joan Baez, and that was their part of the village where they then began to create with the folk music revolution. Now this part of the Bleecker Street is famous for its great food. Murray's Cheese Shop is very famous. Rocco's. Who likes Italian pastries here? Yeah, Rocco's going to be coming up. I love fabulous Italian pastries. Because this was once an Italian section of the village. Now this is not Little Italy. Little Italy is another neighborhood off by Chinatown. But this was a little part of the Italian part of the village, sometimes known as the Latin Quarter. In fact, the church over here left is Our Lady of Pompeii. And this square over here is named after a beloved priest named Father Demo. So we're going to cross 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue, by the way, is the route of the Halloween parade. Who's seen the Halloween parade on TV? What's great about the Halloween parade? Anybody can join it. You don't got to sign up. Just show up in a costume, and you got yourself right in the parade. So we're going to head off into the part of the village. As I said, this is an expensive part now. It's one of the more historic areas. There's a little schoolhouse over here called the Little Red Schoolhouse, a private school. And there's also a part of the village that's occupied by many of the NYU students. Now, NYU, New York University, many people assume it's a public college. It's not. It's a private college. Very expensive. Oh man, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in tuition a year. How many of you got kids? All right, we'll start saving up now for it. And it's one of the most popular. Now, if you want a measure of how safe people feel about a city, is will they let their kids go to school here? And NYU gets more applications than any college in the country. So that's an idea about how safe people feel about New York City. On our right is what are called, so people often ask me about these things, they're called sidewalk sheds. It's to prevent any danger from a falling facade.
Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Jose, we're going to be going straight on Bleecker to Broadway. That's okay? So, ladies and gents, we have a nice cold first day to see the village. As he was saying before, at NYU, the current tuition is $53,000. It's had some famous graduates. Alec Baldwin said it best: if you want to be in the performing arts, go to New York. And if you want to learn the best performing arts, do it at NYU. That's a paraphrase of Alec Baldwin, the famous Long Island guy that's been living in New York. He was famous for his observations of the rip-off Statue of Liberty vendors down in Battery Park. That's one thing I actually think he did. He brought some notoriety to that, which is very good. So I was telling you before about the famous Hunter Green beautiful murals we have here, aka sidewalk sheds. That's local law 10. And that goes back to, unfortunately, a tragic event in 1979. Joyce Gold, she was going to Columbia University, and a masonite debris fell from Barnard University on top of her and killed her. It's kind of made a huge cottage industry out of that. Her sister is actually involved in the scholarship fund since that time. And as I said, a huge cottage industry has been made of it. This is one of the few breaks from scaffolding we'll see. We're making a right shortly up on Broadway, originally Native American trail. And this is one of the few parts of downtown with a grid, small part of it near NYU. And NYU owns the majority of the real estate in this area. So it is young and vibrant. Even Steve Jobs said it best when his Apple store was made on 59th and 5th Avenue. The owner of that offered him a free office space upstairs. And he said, no, I'd rather be downtown where young people are the cutting edge and I can learn from them. And that's what you get downtown in a nutshell, is that it's a little more young, more hip, more vibrant. When I say downtown, I put the exception to Lower Manhattan. Lower Manhattan is primarily business, what's left of it, and it's becoming more residential. New York downtown is a great place also to jump on your bicycle. When we look left or right, we're probably going to see a cyclist. Jose, we're good. Just go up straight and we'll make a right on Broadway.
This is Broadway here.
My apology, my apology. I was looking out for cyclists. So the cyclists, it's kind of sad. In 2019, 28 cyclists were killed. New York Times documented most of the deaths in the last part of 2019. And one of the things that's changing for cyclists is that there's more bike lanes, but they're not protected. Additionally, we have a lot of e-bikes. If you order food in New York, there's probably a very good chance that it's gonna come on an electronic bike. Even those bicycles are worth about $2,000, and most are primarily immigrants. Even they're worrying about their bike getting stolen, because that's their livelihood. You'll see them cycling around. They look like they're carrying big boxes. That's usually insulated for food, hot and cold.
1 minute.
Gonna make it right here on Houston Street. As we turn here to the left, you're gonna see this famous mural. That's the gateway to Soho, south of Houston. In this area, a lot of the street signs are named after Revolutionary War generals. And you can see the difference, how each little neighborhood changes. It's a little different style. You're getting away from NYU here, and you're going west towards the Holland Tunnel. Thank God Robert Moses, I could speak about him for for an hour, but he didn't get his wish of making a Trans-Manhattan Expressway. Basically, Robert Moses is a very famous individual, and I'll save that for later. But if we were to go west, we would head to New Jersey. Only 3 main entrances from
Time.
So we've been talking a lot about the grid today. We're on Houston Street. No, it's not Houston Street. It is Houston, not named after the city in Texas, but after a historic figure here in New York. But these main thoroughfares, you know they're a thoroughfare when you see the traffic going 2 ways. So to my left is Soho, to my right is Greenwich Village. Let's talk about Soho for a minute, because talk about neighborhoods that have had many transformations. That neighborhood started out with a lot of warehouses and manufacturing for clothing. A little while ago.
Right on 6th Avenue, please.
Oh, see. Yes, take a left on 6th Avenue.
Right on 6th.
Also,
Sorry.
we're going to take a right on 6th Avenue, the Avenue of the Americas. I just want to finish about Soho because architecturally speaking in these neighborhoods, there's a lot of diverse architecture. So get a chance to walk around Soho. Notice a lot of the facades are very ornate. Those are cast iron. That is cast iron architecture, an American architectural invention of the 1840s to the 1880s by a man named Bogardus. You could actually go to his foundry in Brooklyn and select a number of architectural features from any period of time, from Greek revival to French chateau, etc., and mix it all up. And then they would bring you a facade, assemble it, and literally bolt it to the side of a very bland brick building, and voila, you have a beautiful building that looks like it was done in stone. So back there, yeah, Houston in Soho. So here we are back in the Village. On your left is the IFC Theater. A lot of counterculture and alternative indie films have been shown here over the decades. Most notoriously, Rocky Horror Picture Show. I almost lost it in my head there for a moment. Yeah, where people actually could interact in the theater and throw things at the screen, and it became kind of a cult thing. Coming up on our left, it's a block or so up, but there's a lot to talk about it, is the Jefferson Street Market Library. It is an incredible building, a neo-Gothic building with a beautiful tower, clock tower with clocks on all 4 sides. It is one of those typical stories of New York where it had its heyday. It was ordered to be demolished, and thankfully a group of people saved it. It was designed to be a courthouse, and there were many famous trials held here, but the most famous was the murder of Stanford White by Henry Thaw because of his incessant jealousy about his wife having an affair with the esteemed architect Stanford White. But if you want to get into 19th century gossip, that is a great story. There was also, aside from a courthouse, it was a ladies' prison. Mae West actually was, had like a couple nights there. If you had a foul mouth and as an entertainer, comic, you could actually be arrested, like Lenny Bruce many times. So today, though, it is a beautiful library, and if you look surround, it's coming up right here on the left, so take a look at it. I actually had the pleasure of living across the street for a summer, and so that was the silhouette I saw every morning as the sun rose. And the beautiful gardens that surround it have lots of cultural activities. So you can see on your left, there's a lot of streets that go diagonally. Again, Greenwich Village doesn't follow a grid, and that's what makes it so special. But it makes it difficult for even us locals to sometimes, orient ourselves and find out, see where we are. Isn't this building incredible? 6th Avenue is also known as the Avenue of the Americas. To honor our relationship with the Americas, Latin America, we early on were passing by Central Park where there were the statues of the Americas, and that is an extension of this because this actually leads you right up to Central Park. Many places to eat, many places to hang out. The Village is is a treasure of New York, and thankfully all of these buildings were saved in part because of a woman named Jane Jacobs and a militant activist group in the 50s and 60s to keep these beautiful federal-style homes built in the early to mid-19th century from being demolished.
Time.
Okay, we are heading up on 6th Avenue. We're heading north. What I'll tell you about 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue for me is an avenue that is a shopping avenue, is an avenue where the flower district used to be in this particular area that we are right now. What I can tell you, if you come here in October, you find the Halloween parade, and it goes up all the way this avenue. It actually turns in 15th Street, and it goes west. I've done it many times. It's a lot of fun. So get dressed, come here in October, and do it. The other thing about 6th Avenue is it's called the Avenue of the Americas. And it was called the Avenue of the Americas because in a few years back, it used to have the national symbol for every country from the Patagonia all the way to Alaska. So now, just south of the avenue, you can find this symbol still. We're coming up to 14th Street again. That's the dividing line between Greenwich and Chelsea. We're coming up to the Chelsea neighborhood. As we go up 14th Street, we're going to find, I'll tell you, there is a store called Dave. And Dave is one of the oldest Army Navy stores in Manhattan. I remember being 19 and coming and buying my jeans there at $20. They are now like $55 or $60 like that. Also, if you're interested in big store, discount store, you have TJ Maxx, you have Bed Bath & Beyond, you have all kind of shopping fairs. What I associate always 6th Avenue is basically with shopping. I live in the area, this is my neighborhood, so every time I go shopping, I basically is either 6th Avenue and is that so that as we head north, we basically going to hit the mecca of all shopping, which is Macy's on 34th Street. So a lot of construction going on in the area. If you see in this corner of 14th Street, there were two beautiful old buildings here, no more. Big towers are going up. It's a really residential neighborhood. The brown building here to your left, it used to be the dormitory for the St. Vincent's medical staff. Now is apartments. They're really tiny, and they are $6,500 to rent. So a lot of these buildings on your right and left are buildings very ornate, and it can tell you of an era of New York in which I call them, wedding cake buildings, because that's what it resembles to me. And here, as you see, there's TJ Maxx, Marshalls. You have anybody likes Trader Joe's, or you don't know about Trader Joe's, the way that I call Trader Joe's, especially for tourists, it's a gay place to come and get souvenirs, eating souvenirs, chocolates, cookies, all kind of things. You have all these great, that you go back home and you tell your friend, look, I bought you all these delicatessens, really expensive from New York, but you actually can get a very good deal of this thing. So I really recommend you to visit Trader Joe's, and they're not paying me for it. Okay. So, also, we're going to come, and on your right, you're going to see a church. It's called the Limelight. And the Limelight, besides was a church once upon a time, it was the home to the one of the most amazing discotheques, bars, dancing, and both for straights and gays back in the 80s and 90s. Now is I think it's a gym. Again, the Trader Joe's on your left, I really recommend that for souvenirs. Burlington Coat Factory is right here, so you go to your call, like today, you can always get a code there. And then here on the corner of 22nd, we have our first Chick-fil-A in Manhattan. And it's always full, I don't know why, but it's always full, okay? They have two now, and they finally, after a fight of almost 20 years, they will be able to come into the city.
Time.
So, continuing our way uptown, leaving this lovely, very, very, very busy neighborhood of Chelsea. You know, the highest concentration that we have of residents here on this old island of Manhattan is here in this neighborhood. I was going past a coffee shop one day, and they said, you know, just one of those little phrases on the chalkboard to get people to come in. And it made me go inside. 16,000 people per square mile live here in this neighborhood. So really, just remember, the city, the island is small, but the buildings are tall. So all of our residents and offices, etc., are going to be concentrated in these skyscrapers here in the neighborhood. I like the mix of some of the older buildings that we have here in this area as well. As you can see to our left, these were some of the, you know, kind of small tenement type buildings. They'll be walk up, you know, with no elevator inside, etc. And as we continue our way here uptown, we remember that this is also called Avenue of the Americas. It was a way that we wanted to honor our South American countries and such, maybe back during that period of the Cold War. You know, it was a nice gesture. But not many people will ever say to you, hey, where's Avenue of the Americas? New York, we're going to be like, where's 6th Avenue go? All right, so always keeping it really quick and tight on the words. Most New Yorkers will only refer to this as 6th Avenue and not necessarily Avenue of the Americas. Now, had I decided to stay here in the United States when I was younger, I may have gone to college here in this neighborhood. This is the area I call Fitland, F-I-T. The Fashion Institute of Technology is just a block over here along 28th Street. And this is where Calvin Klein and several of our big American designers actually went to school. So you might see some fashionable young people walking around with, you know, big portfolios and things of that nature. The neighborhood will lead us back into this sort of fashion district, but on the accessory side. So here in the 20s and the beginning of the 30s, we'll see little shops to our left and right, mostly to our right, that are bead stores. So any of you that have, you know, the artsy-craftsy kind of feeling, if you want to take something special home and say, man, I got these buttons in New York, you might want to decide to pop into one of these stores here along the avenue. Really, really fun because you can always make things, you know, for young people as opposed to buying all of this commercial stuff that we have in places like Macy's, you know. The Flower District right here down the street to your left and my right is one of the nicest neighborhoods. I have a lot of guests that stay here in hotels, and they come out, you know, Saturday morning and they kind of freak out. They're like, wow, you have plants in New York. Yes, we do. We like to keep them in our homes. And so all of the restaurants and many of the hotels will actually get their bulk flowers and stems and things like that that they'll use in order to decorate their lobbies and stores and offices, etc. Now, as we continue up, I'd like for you all to remember that when you're moving around New York, we kind of got to be careful with our personal belongings, you know. And I always remind our young people, don't put your hand out to accept anything from anybody in New York because it's not going to be free, okay? Nothing's free. If they're trying to offer you tickets to a comedy show, you can't get in anyway because you're not 21. So please be careful with these sort of things as you're walking around the city. But, you know, just be aware of your surroundings, so to speak. We have these wonderful CD vendors in Times Square. Those guys are trying to offer you up some of their own personal music. And as soon as they put that CD in your hand, they're expecting about $20. All right, so I don't want to see anybody getting into any arguments, with these guys because, they'll literally just, try to rip you off for more than that, if that be the case. We're coming upon Koreatown. Really, really fun area. I bring some of my friends who come to New York. They go, oh my God, I didn't even know this existed. So just over to our right, on the side streets that we have approaching Herald Square, you're going to see lots of signage in Asian. I'm just going to say it could be Korean, it could be Chinese. I read neither one of them. So, but this is where many folks will come and enjoy some of the Asian fare that we have here in the city.
Side rather of the bus, and that is a statue of Horace Greeley. Some people think he's the one that said "Go West, young man." Well, there's no proof of that, but if he had said it, we know he didn't follow his own advice because he stayed here and got rich. You see, his family was in the printing publishing business, and he founded the New York Tribune. And this is called Greeley Square. You can get a train to go to New Jersey over here. It's called the PATH. It stands for Port Authority Trans-Hudson. It's between New York and New Jersey. When you think of Thanksgiving, besides turkey, what do you always think of?
Macy's.
Nothing.
The Macy's Parade, of course. And we're going to be coming up to Macy's in a minute. It's going to be to our left. But I'd like to tell you a couple of stories because by the time we get there, it's hard. Some of you may have seen the movie Big with Tom Hanks. We used to have a wonderful store by the name of F.A.O. Schwartz that was up near Central Park. And unfortunately, the rent got too high. That's a common story here. And they had to close down. But for several years, we don't know where the piano was that they played on the floor, but now it is in the basement. Look over to your left, R.H. Macy and Company. It takes up the entire block, Broadway to 7th Avenue, 34th to 35th Streets. And if you're a Starbucks fan like me, 2 Starbucks in there. Can't miss that, right? Gotta stay stimulated while you're shopping. So we all think of the parade. I had a wonderful experience one year. I got the opportunity to dress some people for the parade. And here's what I found out. All of the balloon holders in the parade, at least 51% of them have to be Macy's employees. An employee can bring a friend, but each balloon has to be held by, quote, a majority, unquote, of people that are employed by Macy's. So I had to get there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was assigned to dress people for 2 balloons. It just happens that the first year, or the year that I did it, was the first year for Barney. So I had to dress these people all in purple, and mine were from the Macy's of Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Got to get them all dressed, and then at 5:30, they're heading all the way up to the Museum of Natural History. Now, right now, we're on 39th Street. That is up at 78th Street, and that's the beginning of the parade. So they...
turn right on 42nd.
I'm sorry, we're going to turn right on 42nd.
And then right on 5th, just in case you need the
And then a
directions.
right on 5th.
We're gonna do one more loop
Yeah.
around Fifth.
And, I'm sorry, so anyway, I get these people dressed, and then Macy's gives you breakfast. Well, they give you a little breakfast, you're up on the 7th floor, you just want to take a nap, because I come from New Jersey, I was up at 3:30 to get there at 4:30. Later that night, I was falling asleep in the mashed potatoes at my brother-in-law's house, but then you're pretty much off until your balloon comes down. The route goes down Central Park West and comes down 6th Avenue, right here where we are. So obviously it's closed off to vehicular traffic on that day, and the parade would be coming the opposite way of us. So my people are coming back. You have to take their costumes and hang them back up. And this woman was not a Macy's employee. She was the friend of one. She was a teacher, and she came up to me, and she was this sweet little thing that I don't think ever used 4-letter words, and she said, I peed in my uniform. I said, excuse me? She said, there was no opportunity for a bathroom from 5 o'clock on. You have to stand outside, and it's pretty cold, usually that time of year in New York. And all of the good news is that Macy's sends all of those balloon holders uniforms out to get dry cleaned every year. So next year's person didn't have to worry about that. Over to our right, we have Bryant Park. This at one time was a big place for drugs. There were a lot more trees in here. It was a good place to be clandestine. And a lot in the 70s, a lot of drug usage went in here. The city kind of cleaned it up, took out a lot of the trees, made it a beautiful parkland. In fact, they try to do different civic activities here. In the summer, they will put up a screen that is kind of like a vertical blind. So during the day, this screen, you can see through it because the slots are turned open. In the evening, they will turn them to close them, and it becomes like a movie screen. so it doesn't include your view during the day. Over to our right, this is the New York Public Library. We're going to be making a right here and go right in front of this. And you'll see something very funny. We're going to see two lions in front of here. When they first opened, they were called Lord and Lady. Well, they both have manes. That means they're male. So they never should have been a lady. It was Lady Astor and Lord Lennox. Their names were changed by one of our most beloved mayors. It was named by the name of Fiorello LaGuardia. And he changed the names to Patience and Fortitude. He said these were the attributes you needed to have to live in New York City. Now, as Jose turns onto Fifth Avenue, this name has
Your
several
time is
nicknames.
up.
Okay, very good. I'm going to try not to speak too loudly. How's that? Is that okay?
Perfect.
All right. Isn't Jose doing a good job?
Yeah. Thank you, Jose.
He's got the hardest job today. So we're going to make a right here on Fifth Avenue. I'd like to go back a little bit to the library and maybe give it to you from a different angle, and that's what this piece of land was before it was a library. It was part of the old reservoir system in New York. We had this great system, an aqueduct system modeled after the Roman aqueducts, in which water was carried 40 miles in from our reservoir up in Westchester County. Again, Manhattan was an Indian name. It means island of hills. We don't see that so much here, but the further north you go on the island, it gets hillier and hillier. For those of you who were at the Morris Jamel Mansion the other day, you know that for a fact, and in Washington Heights. So they built a bridge, 1848. It's the oldest bridge in New York, and it's still there today. They called it High Bridge. When you look at it, it's funny because it's hardly wider than a lane of traffic. But it wasn't made for traffic, it was made for water. And so we had this aqueduct coming in 40 miles from Westchester County, dropping 7 inches per mile. When you're up in the Bronx, you can still see places, and in Westchester County, where the old aqueduct used to come down. And the water was deposited to several holding reservoirs around the island from which it would be distributed out. And that's what was where that's what was where the New York Public Library is now. If you reflect back in your mind for a moment, you'll see it was elevated, it's a little bit of higher ground, so the water could pour in there, and then there was some pressure to push it on to someplace else. So that's what was there before. You've heard New York called the Big Apple. Some people say it should be called the Big Onion, because there are so many layers here, and you just keep peeling those layers back, and there's more to be found. So that's one layer below the New York Public Library. Again, traffic isn't letting up a bit at all. We still have a lot of cars on the street. We're seeing a lot of taxis. Let's talk a little bit about the taxis. There are a lot of taxis. There are 14,000 taxis in the city of New York. Those aren't the only cars for hire here. If you look at the back, you see that SUV over to the left. The first letter on his license plate is T. There's a vehicle right beside us. If you look out, the first letter on his license plate is T, or her license plate. And in the middle of those plates, you see it says TLC, the Taxi and Limousine Commission. We actually have more cars for hire, a lot more cars for hire than we do yellow taxi cabs. Here on the island of Manhattan, 3/4 of us who live here do not own automobiles. We rely on cars for hire, we rely on the buses, we rely on the subways to get around. The 14,000 cabs, most of these individuals driving these cabs do not own those cars. Again, the licenses are so expensive. They've been up as high as $1 million. They're probably back down around 600, 700,000 right now, but still probably more than the average taxi cab driver can afford.
So right on 34th Street.
And we're going to go right on 34th Street. Is that on the plan? Sorry.
No, we're
No,
extending.
because we're going back to the starting point.
Okay, so should I disregard this?
Just keep going.
I'll just keep going. Okay, so, yeah, so they call them the medallions, the licenses. You'll see on the passenger side of the van a metal disc. It's got a number on it. It matches their license plate. It matches the roof light number. And, yeah, fleets buy these things up, because to make any money with these cars, you have to run them 24/7. You have to have your own fleet. Oh gosh, another accident in front of us with a bicycle. You have to have your own fleet of, your own staff of body and fender guys, mechanics to keep that car rolling so it's not sitting. So these taxi drivers, they lease these cars in 12-hour shifts, 5 in the morning to 5 at night.
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, so enough for the taxis, but let's stick with the traffic. So I hate to admit this, but I have been a licensed driver in New York for 49 years. And in 49 years, I drive almost every day. In 49 years, I have been in 5 accidents. 4 of the 5, I've never gotten a ticket. I've always been in the right, and for the most part, I've gotten I've got hit from behind 4 times and once from the side. 4 out of the 5 times, they've been drivers from New Jersey. So this is a true fact. I know we have some people from Bergen County on the bus, but this is true. You see this guy here to the right? See the Jersey plate? I just want to make sure you can identify him. Here's another one on the right there. There's another Jersey plate. I have documented proof and data that Jersey drivers are much worse. I'm driving with more New York drivers every day, but somehow it's like my car's a New Jersey car magnet. So whatever, a little bit. Okay.